New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
Free my mind, open my heart with the whispers of truth. To live a conscious life, to live a conscious life on the growing edge. On the growing edge.
And now, here's Allie.
Hello and welcome to Growing Edge Live. I'm Allie Benjamin, and it is my great joy to be here today. If you're here for the first time, I'm so happy you found us, and I welcome you. And if you're back again because you enjoy these deep and lively and personal conversations that I have with my guests, I'm so glad that you do, and I'm so glad that you're here. Well, I'm here in a different location today. I'm in Reno, Nevada, and for those of you that don't know, this show is all about having conversations with individuals that channel their time, their talent, their energy, their resources into doing good work in the world. Many of my guests come from the spiritual side of life, but many come from other walks of life. And so we really have a melting pot of conversations here. And today we're going to be talking about relationships, connections, and how we can build upon what we already know during these times when we're sort of all faced with a lot of change and a lot of, a lot of stuff here at the Growing Edge. And so my guest today is Reverend Rhona Segarra. And she has devoted her life and ministry to helping people build healthier relationships and deeper connections. Rhona serves as a minister at Unity of Westminster in British Columbia. She is also a keynote speaker, a TEDx presenter, and a workshop facilitator known for her warm, practical, and heart-centered approach. And there's a lot more to Rhona, and we're going to find out more about her and more about the work she does in the world. So welcome. I'm so glad that you're here, Rhona.
Thank you, Allie. It is so wonderful to be here. I appreciate the invitation very much.
Yeah, well, good. So you live in British Columbia. Have you always lived there?
I was born in South Africa, Cape Town, South Africa, too many years ago now. And moved here when I was 15, with my parents and 4 other siblings. So all 7 of us made it across almost directly through the planet, if you were to draw a line from where we are now to where we came from. It's about as far geographically away from one place as you can get on the planet. And yeah, we moved here in 1977 and moved to Sarnia, Ontario from Cape Town. And then slowly our family moved its way westward and now in Vancouver.
Such a beautiful part of the world.
It certainly is.
Yeah.
It certainly is.
We have that in common because you and I have talked about this previously, but I came from another country, from England, in 1976. So I was 14 at the time. And so we have that in common.
We're the same age.
We're the same age, and it's a very interesting time to come to a different country, to start a whole different life when you're that age. It's such an interesting growth period of our lives when we're 14, 15, 16. I found it to be quite difficult to to integrate into high school at that time, not knowing the culture very well, and we lived at the beach in Southern California, so it was a very different culture to England, to the countryside of Oxfordshire. And so yeah, I can imagine coming from the other side of the world for you was equally as novel and an opportunity for you to stretch a bit.
You had no option but to stretch. And at the same time, it was an adventure. Coming from, you're right, the transition, from a school system where everyone wore the same uniform, right down to the underwear. And when parents and when teachers walked into the room, you stood up, and when you answered a question, you stood up. To come from that to my first day at school here in Canada was Halloween.
Oh my God.
And so to walk in, and of course here, the students go to the classroom, so there's like this melee in between periods where everybody's moving around to get to the next classroom. That was completely foreign to me. And then Halloween, and to have all these people dressed in all of these costumes, which was not something we did in South Africa. That was a whole different thing too. So it was like, okay, we're in a whole different place here. So
I can relate to that. So you have siblings, and you came with both parents. And so tell us a little bit about your upbringing in South Africa. That, as you mentioned, your school was different, as was mine. Same underwear, same hats, different hats for each season, boarding school. So yeah, I get that.
Familiar, yes.
Yeah.
Well, I was really fortunate. I had two parents who were absolutely amazing. In South Africa at the time, the regime was the apartheid regime, and what that meant by law is that people had to be treated differently. If you were a different color, you, by definition, were not allowed to get into certain schools, could not sit in the same places on buses, had your own designated cars in the, it's not the subway, they used to have a train, a commuter train. And so there was this prejudice that you were born into without even recognizing that it was there. And my parents were people who taught us that that was the law, but it was not the way the way people should be treated. So I was really fortunate because we were exposed to the expanse of differences that, some things are maybe imposed on you, and you don't always have to believe it or act according to it. And maybe it helped to create a bit of rebellion in each of us. I don't know. But there was a real sense of encouraging us to make our own free decisions rather than accept what was told to us.
Oh,
So that was amazing.
Yeah, that is so different than so many people are raised with. To question, to consider beyond the norms. That's a beautiful way that your parents introduced you to life. Probably prepared you for a life of service and ministry as you've moved in that direction.
Well, there was a genuine care about the individual that was taught to us before we even know that we were being taught. And I suppose that's what's carried me through ever since. It definitely was foundational for us. And the other thing we did, now that you mention it, is suppers were times to sit and talk. So quite often we would listen to the news on the radio, because it was radio in those days, and then we talk about what was going on. And I think the conversation, the debate, perhaps, also helped to formulate values and discuss what values look like in a place where sometimes the law doesn't match what your personal values are.
Mm. Yeah, that's so rich. Conversation around a dinner table or supper table, sharing, each child or each person at the table having to hear from one another. We did something in our family similar, not to do with maybe the news, but to ask highs and lows. What happened in your day, or what's going on in your life at the moment that you consider a high or a low. And I found that to really give my children, as well as my husband and I, a deeper understanding of the differences and how they organize their thoughts around what they were experiencing. And I think that I'm here in Reno today, and I visited with my nephew yesterday, and he's on a debate team. He's about to go off to university, and he's going to DC, Washington, DC, to participate in these debates with other kids from other parts of the country. And so I find that really moving to have those deeper conversations about meaning and reason and why we're doing what we're doing and what's really important and what really matters. And you and I were talking about that earlier, and we'll get around to that after our break. But before we dive into that, you're a minister, you're a unity minister. And I'd like to know a little bit about your spiritual journey. Was your family religious or spiritual, or how did your first experience with that side of life happen?
My mom was a very devout Anglican. My father was anything goes. He was not really a participant in any of the religious things that we did, except going at Easter and Christmas sort of idea. But my mom was the one who was like my spiritual guide, if you will. And I remember, though, very clearly that it's also very innate in me. One of my clearest memories is sitting on the bed with my giant children's Bible on my lap while all the other kids are outside playing. And it was because I was just so fascinated by these stories and the amazing illustrations that were so larger than life. And even like South Africa has a religious overtone, at least it used to. I don't think it's so much there anymore in the school system. So there would be a prayer group, and there would be a little Bible study group, and so on, that people could choose to go to or not. And I went. And there was always this part of me that was fascinated by religion. And as I grew older, I became one of the leaders at the youth part of our church and joined the choir. And when we moved to Canada, did the same thing here. And it wasn't until maybe my teens that I started to really question some of the things that I was saying in an unquestioning way every week. That was part of, the prayer service, the Book of Common Prayer in the Anglican tradition, and and following them along and reading things that just didn't fit for me. Things like, "We're not worthy so much as to gather up the crumbs under thy table." And there was a part of me that would say that every week. And there was another part of me that started to go, really? Really? So there was a part of me that was aware that I wasn't perfect, but I wasn't all that bad either. And then there was another part that really questioned how, if God could make a flower perfectly and could make seasons perfectly, God, by at that point it was God, right? Um, if all of this other stuff could be perfect, then why would he, it was always a he, make an inferior product in humans? It just, it was this growing awareness of a disconnect that that kind of warred a little bit with my passion for the teachings of Jesus and my love for the old hymns and the sounds of those beautiful melodies. And when I got married, my husband and I eventually moved to Saskatoon, and I was at the Anglican church there, and it was a tipping point for me a little bit because the minister one day said, we're going to have a guest speaker next week. And this person used to be lesbian, and God has cured her of her disease. That's what it was. Cured her of her disease. And that was the closest I ever came to walking out of the service. And it really was, it shattered in some ways my not belief, but my willingness to put up with the other stuff that I was kind of going, not so sure about. It was like, no, this is beyond me. Now, that was only one ministry. I recognize that. And I also recognize that the Anglican tradition itself has moved from some of those tenets. But at the time, it was, this is no longer for me. And so I walked away from it, and eventually, with time, moved to Vancouver, and was talking to a friend about how I missed the tradition of church. I missed I wanted to find something like that, but it was kind of a mismatch with my own values. There it is again, and she said, well, why don't you try Unity? They have kind of a different take on the teachings of Jesus, and they don't think of they don't consider worth as being something where you're unworthy, that you need to be redeemed. And I'm like, well, that sounds interesting. So I went to Unity in White Rock in British Columbia, and funnily enough, it was Halloween there too. The first day I walked in, so I was like, "Oh, okay." The firsts all over the place apparently include Halloween for me. So yeah, so that's kind of how I found Unity, and then over time I grew to appreciate the teachings of it more, and over time, and all kinds of life things happening, which we probably don't have time for. But long and short of it was, my job ended. I had an opportunity to finally do the ministry, which I was always going to pursue sometime in the future. It was always going to be, one day I will. And then when the job experience ended, it was like, if not now, when? And so that's how I came to here.
Beautiful. And so how long have you been how long have you been a minister, and where do you serve currently?
I was ordained in 2019, in June of 2019, so not too long ago. Although by ministry standards, unfortunately, ministers don't stay in pulpit ministry for very long, apparently. But I've been fortunate. I have been the minister at Unity in New Westminster since I was ordained.
Mm.
And prior to that, I was acting as their credentialed leader until I was ordained. So, yeah. And New Westminster is part of the Greater Vancouver area. If you were to look at it on a map, most people will just say you're from Vancouver. It's about 40-minute drive outside.
Mm. Beautiful. So tell us about your community, your congregation, and what is the atmosphere of your space, your classes, your Sundays, your...
Well, it's evolving, and it's evolving in a most lovely and delightful way. Unity of New Westminster has been there for over 50 years. So it's got a lot of heart. It has people who have been there through ups and downs, with ministers coming and going, and ministers retiring and not finding a minister that felt right for them, so choosing not to have one for several months. And like it's gone. We've got people there who have held the space for the community for years and years. And we are starting now to see new people coming in who are young families, who are not in the 60 plus age group. I hate to think of us. I hate to think of me as being in that, but there's actually there's some movement to having people who are a younger demographic coming in, and because it's somewhat new for us, we tried to launch a children's program last week, several years ago, and it just didn't work. And now slowly, what we're finding is that people are coming in with children. And because we didn't really have a program, I just set up some kids' tables at the back, and I have crafts and coloring and all kinds of other things, but they're at the children's level. And the kids go there and they kind of play and do their own thing, and the parents tend to sit somewhere close by. But they are in the place right now of being with us, and it's lovely. There's this sort of youthful buzz of noise occasionally, which it sounds, to me, it sounds so rich. And I have actually asked the people who normally sit at the back if they find it distracting, just in case, but they don't. And everybody just loves this feeling of inclusion that comes from having us all together. And we're now moving to, in fact, we just had a brainstorming session last week. We're now moving to a plan where at least once a month we'll create something deliberately for the children down in the hall where they can run around and do stuff that is not just crafts and playing, although they seem to really love that anyway. And they're still getting, they're hearing the children's blessing, they're hearing some of the songs, and so some of it's filtering in anyhow. But once a month, that'll be our next evolution, I think, is to have a place that is for the kids, that they can have a lesson that is designed for them. And the other thing I might consider, and I did it when we were trying to launch something several years ago and it didn't work, was I actually created a children's program as the Sunday service, and had people pretending that they were in the boat as the storm was rocking, and it was a hoot, and it was all with adults. And so maybe we'll do a kid-friendly service as a Sunday service for all ages. Why should the kids have all the fun?
It sounds like a very creative ministry.
It is. At least I'd like to think it is, and it's not just me. There are people there who are willing to try new things um, and participate in a way that's not just the way things always were. And I find that very encouraging.
Yeah. I think that's probably why you're getting these younger families come to you, holding that space for something new, and having a community that's flexible and wanting to experience new things and youth, and to bring that together must be a very exciting new chapter for you, as you've been there for quite some time now.
It made my heart sing. It makes my heart sing. Like yesterday, we had 5 little ones at the back, and it makes my heart sing just to see them connecting with each other. And also, one little one was just reading a book, and the others were making Easter bunny crafts. And then after the service yesterday, when I was having a little chat with them while we were having snacks, and one of them told me very clearly, next week is St. Patrick's Day. We have to have St. Patrick's crafts. I'm like, okay. So it's really fun. Yeah.
Oh, good. I'd love to. Well, we're right here at the bottom of the hour. Why don't we take a short break? And then I want to come back and I want to hear about your TEDx talk and how that all came to be. So we'll take a short break and we'll be back, Rhona and I, in about 3 minutes.
Please help us say thank you to all of our organizational sponsors, including the Hepperlin Foundation, Affiliated New Thought Network, International New Thought Alliance, Science of Mind Archives and Library Foundation, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown, New Thought Philadelphia, Center for Spiritual Living United Life, Sunshine Cathedral, Planned Happiness Institute, Summit Center for Spiritual Living, One Heart Retreats, Universal Joy Center, Unity Kitchener, Unity Spiritual Center Ottawa, Home Center for Spiritual Living, Satya Center, Begin Within Ministries, Center for Spiritual Living North Jersey, Unity of Savannah, and the Center for Spiritual Living Seattle, as well as all of our individual donors. On behalf of New Thought Media Network, thank you, and please like, share, and subscribe. New Thought Media Network, come be you. Come expand your spiritual journey. Join us for Just the Talk, Sundays, 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Experience Unity Kitchener and Ottawa. Center for Spiritual Living Midtown, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, Unity of Garden Park, New Thought Philadelphia, the Sunshine Cathedral, Unity of Savannah, and the Om Center for Spiritual Living. Come unleash your spiritual potential with New Thought Media Network.
Free my mind, open my heart with the whispers of truth. To live a conscious life, to live a conscious life on the growing edge. On the growing edge.
now, here's Ali.
And we're back, me and Reverend Rhona Segarra, and we are talking about her ministry and her life. And there's, when I was looking at your website, I came across the picture of you on the TEDx stage talking. How did all of that happen, and what did you talk about, and how exciting was that?
Wow. How it happened is I was actually talking to a couple of people, young people in our community. They're now at university and college, but I was chatting with them a year and a half ago ish in the summer of 2024, I guess, and saying how I actually wouldn't mind doing a TED talk one day. And their response was, "You do a TED talk every week." And I'm like, "Oh, that's really sweet." And, it would be fun to do that one day. But I don't really have a topic. And they came up with, well, why don't you do it on the growth of secular faith in a time of declining religious faith? And I thought, oh, that sounds kind of cool, but didn't quite hit me. But the idea of these kids actually believing in me enough made me think, okay, what could I do? Like, what could I bring together? And I realized that one of the things that I have a perhaps unique perspective about is that I am also a wedding officiant. And I had at that time done about 150 weddings, out of which 149 couples had said they don't want religious language in their ceremony.
Mm.
And then tying that to the idea of loneliness, which was something that is at that time even more so, I think, gaining popularity as a recognition that we're in a loneliness crisis. And tying those two together with my own experience and my hearing about how people they've moved away from church, but they miss the community. They don't want the dogma, but they miss the feeling of belonging. And then taking those sort of three elements, the loneliness, the growing feeling of I'm not interested in a religious reference, and when I was part of a religious tradition, I really enjoyed that feeling of being part of something. And putting those together and thinking, well, what if we could use some of the elements that are in traditional religions that are sort of baked into the traditional religion framework that help to build belonging? And could we do that in a more secular society? So that was sort of my idea, was things like baptisms, and we do it with weddings, but these other important coming of age ceremonies that are held in the religious traditions are the things that help you know that you're part of something bigger. And when we've turned away from religious practices, in some way we've lost some of the wealth of those traditions, the heart and the warmth and the celebratory nature of those traditions. And so that was my talk. My talk was all about the idea of taking the best parts of religious practice and building them into our non-religious secular lifestyles. And my points were to step forward at any like major milestone, like bat mitzvahs and confirmations. Those are all part of the religious tradition. But there's nothing to stop a child who is, turning from tweenhood to teenhood. Like that's a big milestone. Why don't we find a way to celebrate that with some kind of massive party for them and a gift that's meaningful from the parents and so on. So hold the same celebration, but without the religious.
Mm.
So that was one. Was my first step was step forward. My second one was step outward, and the idea there is to recognize that it takes an effort to get to a church or a temple or a synagogue every week, but people do it because they step outward to meet in person because nothing breaks us out of where we are more than being able to meet each other in person. It requires putting the phone down. It requires disengaging from the couch and the TV and the computer and the doom scrolling and all those other things. Meeting in person helps to build belonging. So that was my second point, was step outward. And then the third one was to step together. And the idea there was to the thing that binds religious organizations and the people in religious organizations is their shared belief or shared agreement about the belief structure of whatever it is that they're part of. My encouragement was to take that and blow it a little bit more out of the water, because that's the thing that so many people have turned away from religion because of is, if you need to belong here, that's great, but you can only belong here if you do these classes and agree with these tenets and so on. And my suggestion is let's broaden our horizons and find a way to accept one another with some agreed upon principles that we might all choose to abide by. So that was my third step, is the idea of stepping together as a group or as a family. And so that was the talk. How did it come to be? It was quite a large, long process, actually. The application, I was one of 125 people who applied to TEDx, sorry. And they have a very long, not long, a detailed application process where you have to fill out a little bit about you and why you're the person who's going to be the best one to talk about this, why you're uniquely positioned to talk about this subject. Then they ask you to give a preliminary idea of your points and what your script might look like. And then from that 125 people, they dropped down to 25 as a short list. And then from that 25, they choose 12 after doing in-person auditions. And the process is very structured, very loving, very supportive, very professional, and excellent. At the end of which you come up with a talk that looked nothing like your original proposal, because they workshop things to encourage you to refine your talk. So if it doesn't belong, don't put it in there. Mark Twain, I think it was, who said, I didn't have time to write a short letter, so I wrote a long one instead. Well, the whole idea here is to, with a TED Talk, is if it doesn't serve the purpose of the talk, no fluffy stuff. It's got to come out. And so, doing that, preparing for it, practicing it, learning it, internalizing it, was a lovely process.
Wow. And what was on the day, what was your actual experience, and what did you learn about yourself? And I'd love to know how it impacted you, your congregation, your community, and what you've learned since. That's a lot. So how was the actual day? How was the actual, were you first up, middle of the pack, last one?
Middle of the pack, right before lunch, which was a perfect timing. The I was, so one thing I will say, I was so grateful for the preparation, because at the time, the TEDx was on a Saturday. My mom was admitted to the hospital on Tuesday, 4 days before. And at the time I was doing my talk, she was undergoing surgery. And it was, oh my God, the night before, when she realized, like, up until the night before, she was going to be there. She was going to be there. And when she realized that she wasn't going to be there, it was a really, really, really tough experience for both of us. What made it better, what actually ended up easing it, was I recited my talk for her in the hospital. And I can feel it now.
Yeah.
It was my final practice. And it was in the end, as I walked on the stage, it was my mom's shoulders that I felt I was standing on.
Oh.
And then, to be part of an ensemble of people who have such interesting experiences, and to make the connections with those people. So we became a little mini family ourselves. And that was lovely. It was like this surreal experience of a culmination of all of these months of preparation, and then to stand there with the lights on you, with the background and the big red dot and the TEDx sign, and to look out and see faces, some of whom I knew, and then most of whom obviously I didn't. But it was one of the highlights of my life, and it was so interesting that it was juxtaposed by one of the most sad times of my life as well.
Yeah. How did your mom take it when you did your rehearsal with her? Was she must have been so proud and so I'm sure sad that she couldn't be there in person, but to have your final rehearsal with her, that must have been a deeply moving and special moment.
It was. It was at that moment that she insisted. Our family does everything together. And so I was, even up to that point, I'm like, Mom, I'm sort of thinking I shouldn't go do this because I want to be with you. And she insisted, after hearing the talk, like, that I not do that, that this is a message that should be heard. And it was really deeply moving.
Yeah.
For me, my sister was in the room. My mom was in a room with another lady, and she was also very deeply moved. So, it was precious memory now.
Yeah, I can feel that. And so once you had given your talk and you set it up so perfectly with, all the branding of TEDx and the spotlight and all the preparation, how did you feel it landed? Did you make that connection that is so pivotal to your work? Did you feel that connection took place during, following the talk?
Yes, well, yes, there was a feeling of, well, there's nothing so lovely as to get a standing ovation, which I did. And to get people to come. I mentioned I was one of the last speakers before lunch. So at lunchtime, I had several people come up to thank me about the recognizing the loneliness and the value that church helped with that, and giving them a little bit of a path about how to gain that sense of belonging again, even though they no longer follow that faith tradition. And so, if only one person had heard that and changed, that would have been enough for me. But I heard several that day. And then I even had a few friends come to me later and say, I normally would have done Easter with just our family, but I was thinking of your talk. And so I called my aunt and my cousins, and we all got together. I'm like, thank you. So that was awesome. And then the way TED works is it doesn't just keep once the live performance is done, the talks are reviewed by the TED organization, and then they select essentially one talk per day for Monday through Friday to be considered the editor's pick of the day. And you may imagine they get about 25,000 talks a year to review. And they selected my talk as one of the editor's picks for the day. So they must have liked it too. So,
Rhona, that's lovely. I'm so happy that you had that experience and felt that impact based on the editor's pick and the standing ovation and the whole premise of coming together and making moments more special and deeper. And I really feel that this is part of what can bring more of what we're missing today as humanity, especially here in the United States. I'm not sure about Canada at the moment, but I would imagine it's similar. There is a disconnect with the constant screen time that people spend, and not going to church as much as people used to, and lacking, even working remotely now has taken people out of the workplace community. And so what do we do during a time like this when there is sort of this hunger or this desire for more connection in the world, but yet our world seems so divisive and so separate in so many ways. So many differing opinions and values have come to the surface that it's a difficult time to navigate. But what you shared in your talk and throughout this time we've been having a conversation, I'm feeling like we're scratching the surface of doing it differently, of making this time in between what used to be and what will be. We have an opportunity to create something different. And I think that's the magic of New Thought, that we put such emphasis on the power of our thinking, the power of our emotions, and the power of knowing what you truly value, and then combining that into a spiritual practice is something unique, I think, not completely unique, but it's very much what New Thought's Unity, Centers for Spiritual Living, Science of Mind, and all of the other independent New Thought organizations. This is something that we so emphasize. So what do you say to that, and what we can do? And maybe there's people watching that don't have a community or don't go to church, or they have that longing for connection and for deeper meaning and can feel the whispering winds of change, but they don't know what to do about it.
They don't know what to do about it. Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think people are, this new technology that we call the cell phone, and which is now not so new anymore, but it's still evolving. And I think our relationship to it is still evolving in terms of, when do we put it down? When can we unplug? I think we also need to recognize that so much of um, what families do today are compressed into Saturdays and Sundays, and that makes it even harder to find a grounding, tethering item that the whole family can gather around. And it used to be the church. Now it may be the hockey rink or the the soccer field or whatever it is that kids are involved in, dance and all that stuff. There's so much of that happens now that I don't know happened as much in the time that our parents were raising us.
Mm-hmm.
I think at that point, Sunday mornings were kind of carved out for church. That's when you go. So I think there are parts of it that are simply societal. There are other parts, though, where we've reached a place now where the parents of young children today are the products of my generation, our generation, where our generation turned largely away from the church. Our children, therefore, have no experience at all with it in many situations. Like my son was, tagged along because I took him to church, but he's one of maybe half of his friends have ever even stepped foot into church. And so now their children are in a place where they don't have that, they don't see that, they don't even have the opportunity to know what the benefit of being part of a community that just talks about ideas, what that benefit might be. And that's where I think we might have a place, because I do think people like your nephew, people are interested in debate. They're interested in the questions about life. They're interested in how do I make my relationship with myself, but even more importantly to me, my relationship with my husband and my children and my family more meaningful, because that's where heaven on earth lands. And I think the place for those kinds of conversations, dogma free, is something that people are seeking. And call it social emotional learning if you want to do it for kids, but frankly it's that same idea, except it doesn't need to have learning. It's more like social emotional realizations that we offer at some of these new thought outlets. And it's a matter of letting people know that they're there somehow, that come in for a conversation, come in because we're talking about essentially, how do you answer questions? How do you answer these everyday concerns that people have in a way that is dogma free, but is still offering practical ideas so that they can have lives that are meaningful and joyful and connected and compassionate. There is no place, if it's not a unity church, a center for spiritual living, depending on how dogmatic a religion is, perhaps it would be there. But I really think that's where people are. I think that's what people would be interested in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I typically end my show with asking my guests, We all know the song, "What the World Needs Now Is Love, Sweet Love." And we've talked at some length about, what the world needs. And your talk was, your TED talk, and all that you've shared today has really help expose what's missing, and the steps we might take. Is there anything more? Is there anything outside of possibly going back to church? Are there other ways? I was thinking when you mentioned my nephew, like maybe we could start a series of debates, which, just friendly, non-denominational debates on, things of value. Bring your values and let's talk about them. But, how would we go about that when we're all so isolated and separated, and we need a brainstorming session?
A brainstorming session. I think it becomes things like one of the things I think would be really transformative for all of us is if we could learn to live in the land of both and. That we can have a certain viewpoint and recognize that somebody else may have a completely different viewpoint, and then to be willing to peel back the sticky note, perhaps, to find that the value underneath both of them is probably the same. It's just the approach may be different. And I think a couple of things about that. I mean, even the song, Burt Bacharach, "What the World Needs Now Is Love." The next line is, "Lord, we don't need another mountain." And what I would love for us to realize is that we are the face of God, that we need to be the one, not waiting for some third party to say, okay, this is how you go about loving each other. We're it. And it's up to each one of us to expand our own worldview, to look at the person that we don't agree with and understand that there may be a value underneath there that we completely identify with. We just see it completely differently. And the more we do that, the more we're in a place where we can have a discourse, where we can actually have a dialogue rather than a monologue, which I feel like I'm doing too much of talking. It's only when we get to that point that when we can talk to each other, maybe eat together, find ways to talk to people rather than movement to movement, which is not, it's not individual enough. It's not able to be connected heart to heart enough. I think some of those things might.
Yeah. Well, all of that is wonderful food for the soul and things to consider. And Rhona, I've so enjoyed having this conversation with you. We're right here at the end, and thank you so much for being here. And I know people can connect with you. You have your website where they can learn more about you and be in touch with you, rhonasegarra.com. And thank you for being here today with us at The Growing Edge.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, everyone. We'll see you next week. If you've enjoyed this show and would like to support these conversations, this Growing Edge ministry, you can find us at growingedgelive.com. You can also see the code there at the top left-hand corner of the screen if you'd like to make a donation. Thank you. Every penny counts to bring this vibrant, juicy conversation, this series of conversations, right to you where you are. Peace and blessings. Thank you to New Thought Media Network and our sponsor, the Satya Center. See you next week.
Free my mind, open my heart with the whispers of truth. To live a conscious life, to live a conscious life on the growing edge.